Well, in the vein of,
Main vein?
you ever see that movie? You ever seen that movie? What is that? The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Deer Grow.
Man, it's almost food plot season, Jared, and Deer Grow is one of those products that has really changed the way that we plant food plots and the success we've seen from them.
No doubt. I've been, trying to plant food plots my entire whitetail hunting career, which is a little shorter than yours. But the minute that I started, or that I realized that I could get Deer Grow back into some of these remote plots where I couldn't get lime or fertilizer, especially in the 50-pound bag, format. Mm-hmm. So everything was changed. I could get into these spots moving forward with a backpack sprayer, and that's since escalated to these 40 or 60 gallon sprayers, and we're doing upwards of 5 to 10 acre food plots just with Deer Grow and having phenomenal success.
Yeah, and with the price of fertilizer, lime, diesel, everything this year, what better way to get in there and grow a successful food plot at about a third of the cost? Check out Deer Grow at deergrow.com. And we're back.
Hey,
another episode of HUNTR Podcast, episode 80.
Yes, sir.
80.
But anyways, yeah, you should check out that Shorzy show. It's pretty funny. It's pretty rough to get through.
Why is that?
It's very vulgar. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's
straight up Nick's alley.
It's not something that like my wife and I would enjoy together, but it's like if I need a little,
you need some of those.
Yeah, if you're ready, if you need like a little trash snack or something, like it's very funny.
Check it
out. It is June 16th. June 16th. Yes.
Ew.
I'm recovering from an illness.
Yeah. Would you say you're much better than yesterday?
Yes. Yesterday I laid in bed all day.
Yeah.
And I felt like dog shit.
Seems like it would just be allergies, man. Like real bad.
I think it started with allergies, and then I think that led into like my body. And then again, and what was that, Tuesday, I was in Ohio on the farm, and it was 100 degrees with a heat index, and I was pouring sweat.
Why don't you share your crackhead story real quick?
Yeah, so we, things never go as planned. So if you've been listening, I've got a farm in Ohio, and I've got a tenant in a house there. It's an old farmhouse, and she don't pay me much, but it's part of the property. And there were rumors that she was letting meth heads or whatever stay with her. And the neighbors called me, and I basically, I don't put up with that shit. So I went down on Tuesday and went to do some spraying, and my tractor's stored behind some gates, and damn meth heads tried to steal my tractor, cracked the ignition out of it, put in a battery where they drilled carpenter nails into a freaking battery to hook it up to terminals. You would think like, yeah, okay, crackheads do stupid stuff. And there it is, like in real life. So I'm going to kick her out of the house and bulldoze the house.
Yeah.
That's the plan.
So we're learning as we're talking about different income producing opportunities for properties, tenants are one of them. And
and that was the option, is like I could kick her out, redo it and sell it to someone, but who's to say they're not a crackhead as well?
Yeah.
And so the easy solution is bulldoze that son of a bitch.
Yeah.
So I'm going to bulldoze it in August, and then eventually maybe build a pole barn. But
there you go. So you're out like whatever, a couple $100 a month, but you got peace of mind knowing
it cost me a couple $100 a month to cut the damn grass.
Yeah. Well, and to fix your tractor, and you know, expenses are being created by.
Yeah. So we're going down that path. So yeah, and it was hot. I mean, on a plus side, although I don't know, my cameras aren't working. I did get 4 mineral sites out.
Cameras aren't working.
No, I don't have. I guess my service. I don't know.
Maybe.
It was a bad day.
And
then I came home and I was like, man, I don't feel great. Like I know, I mean, it was hot. I was sweating like crazy. And then yesterday, well, I guess it would have been Tuesday night. I was like, I looked like a meth head. I like woke up like chills and shit. And then yesterday it sucked. And today I'm back. I just don't have a voice.
Cool. I'm glad you're feeling.
So I'm sipping tea.
Feeling better. Is that what you got in that mega thermos, that mega pint of thermos?
Sponsored by Napa. Yes, tea. So yeah, making it
cool.
Good enough.
Well, I'll try to.
Yeah, you're gonna have to leave consciously. We have a guest today, so that's the fortunate part, is it's not just us back and forth, because I'd be pretty uncompelling, I think.
Yeah, well, that's all right. So, well, cool. In the
wait, no, let's stop right there.
Okay,
this is the dedication to the show, though, right? I mean, sick or not, man.
You got 2 of them today.
Putting a damn
we got
podcast
Sturgis
out
on this afternoon.
Yeah, we're putting a podcast out.
We're cranking, man.
So,
well, in the vein of
main vein.
You ever see that movie? You ever seen that movie? What is that? What movie is that? He's like, I gotta go drain the main vein, and they're like, Dickie. He's like, sorry. He's like, I go pee pee now.
Yeah, what is that movie?
Dickie Roberts, Child Stars. What that is?
Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Anyways, in the main vein of fawn recruitment, and we've had some conversations recently with John Kilgo, Eric Long, and a few others. Dr. Disturbance, just talking about likelihood of fawn survival, which they call fawn recruitment, and what we can do as land managers to implement, whether it's trapping practices, predator management, or on the other side of it, habitat improvements, and if the two do in fact help with your deer herd in general, with fawn recruitment. And so Casey Shoopman is our guest today. You probably recognize him from the Management Advantage, and maybe a few other places. But I mean, the guy is a very good trapper. He may have some kind of contract with the government. As far as trapping,
License
I'm not
to
sure.
kill.
Right. I don't know if that's the case or not, but the guy does a lot of trapping. I think he's very successful with it. And so I think we're going to learn from him on that a little bit today. And as it relates to fawn recruitment, I know Casey's a big buck killer too. I've seen him kill several old mature bucks on the Management Advantage. So
for sure.
Excited to have Casey on today.
Cool. Let's bring him in.
There we go.
What's up, man?
Like it was planned, Casey, Eric Long texts me and says, tell Casey I said hi.
He just texted me and said, tell the boys I said hi.
And he probably did it like this.
Oh, yeah. Guaranteed. Something really awkward.
Go back to work, Eric.
Yeah.
You're on government dollars today.
That's right.
He's begging for a live stream of this right now. But
Yeah. Well, we can bring him in.
we should have just included him in on it.
Next time.
Oh, yeah.
Next time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We get him worked up too much.
Yeah.
Oh, he's pretty easy to get worked up.
He is.
So, Casey, tell us a little bit about. I opened the show just with talking about some conversations we've had recently with guys whose names you may know. Definitely Eric. Eric Long is somebody you know very well. John Kilgo is somebody that's done a lot of research around predation and fawn recruitment, and
Primarily in South Carolina.
And Dr. Disturbance, Marcus Lashley out of Florida.
Mississippi State, Tennessee, he's been all of them.
Yeah. And so we've been kind of, getting our head wrapped around the idea of fawn recruitment. What can be done? Is predator management a part of that? Is habitat improvement a bigger part of it, or how does it come into play? And so it seemed like a perfect time to bring in a very experienced trapper and somebody who's familiar with management practices. And so it's a cool time to have you on.
So update me on that Kilgore's research. I don't know him. I haven't.
So John works for basically on the Savannah River site in South Carolina. His main duty is research surrounding the deer populations and habitat, but in effect, it's relation to predation side of things. So, John's done a couple different things. One, he's basically harvested coyotes out of that Savannah River site, which is a very large area. And essentially what they found is that even by removing a lot of coyotes, the fawn survival rate stayed about the same. And it seemed like it was because of what I call it the sponge effect, right? That they would essentially remove coyotes out of an area and new coyotes would move into that area. And I think John also said that there wasn't any real relation to habitat types having better survival than the others either.
Yeah, it was kind of a dismal conversation.
It was a lose-lose.
Yeah, at the very end of it, he was like, I don't think there's anything we can do.
Yeah.
What's the timing of when those coyotes were removed?
I'm going to say year-round.
Yes, year-round. Yep, he was removing year-round.
Because the goal of the project was to just eliminate coyotes as effectively as possible year-round in hopes that would have some correlation with fawn recruitment the following year.
And so basically there were subsequent years that there were no change. There was actually a subsequent year that had less survival than before trapping on the coyotes as well.
Yeah. And he's obviously open, like any researcher should be, is hey, if in your area you perceive that these efforts are having a positive impact, by all means, continue to do them. But he just, I think, didn't have any research data to put behind it.
Yeah, and I think it came down, Casey, that ultimately, even though John's research is showing it, the question becomes like, anybody who sees coyotes or is wanting to hunt coyotes or trap coyotes, yeah, go do it. But is that effort actually going to have a positive effect on fawn recruitment, at least?
In case we don't expect a yes/no answer from you. I don't know if you have given that any thought, or if you're like, I just love trapping coyotes like we do.
No, I mean, I guess you could call me a professional trapper. I mean, people hire me to come into their properties and do this type of activity.
Okay.
And Casey, I guess right there, for when somebody calls you to hire you for that, what is their goal? I mean, simply it's remove coyotes, but ultimately is it because they want more deer and so they're trying to protect their fawns?
All my clients are wildlife guys. They want more deer, they want more turkeys.
Okay.
So yeah, and I don't know if this holds any weight, but I haven't had a new client in 10 years. And maybe that's just because they like me, or maybe I'm doing a good job for them. So yeah, I want to eliminate anybody's preconceived notion that I'm doing this to try to drum up more business.
Meaning your docket is full. Like you might get some calls, but you're like, hey,
I'm had a new client in 10 years because I don't have time.
Sure.
Anybody that's ever done any kind of trapping or a trapping program knows that it's very labor intensive. And you have to be there. All my jobs that I do are, depending on the size of the property, are 10 to 14 days.
Mm-hmm.
And I typically, if somebody would call me, whenever I was building this up, if they had anything less than 2,000 acres, I'd tell them, I don't really want to take your money. Mainly because I'd be done trapping by 10 a.m.
Right.
And I'd be bored for the rest of the day. And I felt guilty for being there and not getting paid to do something.
Yeah.
Two, I don't think, on anything smaller than that, you're not really accomplishing much as far as taking out a large number, because you and I both know that this needs done on a landscape level.
Yeah.
The larger the property, the better. So some of these guys that I've done work for, say they only had 400 or 800 acres, they end up calling the neighbors. They pay for me to go in and trap their place because they want as good of a job as possible, knock out as big of a hole as possible while I'm there.
Yeah.
I will say this. The reason I asked about the timing, because I'm totally unfamiliar with any research that's really done. I kind of do my own thing.
Yeah.
So what I have done is I've tried to get my clients to really nail down when their fawning season is, because it changes. Mm-hmm. I mean, look at most of my work I've done in Alabama. There's 5 or 6 different times that fawns drop depending on what part of the state you're in. So I'll have them, run trail cameras pretty hard and try to pinpoint that, or we can backdate it whenever they see the most, I guess, rut activity. I don't know. It's not necessarily scientific, but we try to nail that fawning time down as close as we can.
And when you say fawning, you're talking about, maybe I don't want to jump too far ahead here, but so like right now, Case, we're running cameras and like I've got spotted fawns at mineral sites with does starting as of a week ago, and so I'd say venture to say 2 weeks before that they're laying in the grass somewhere, and we're June 16th right now, so I've got fawns hitting the ground end of May, early June.
So if you tried to start trapping right now, you're really kind of a little bit late. Because those fawns are able to get up and take off running. I think you'll still have coyotes that'll predate on them now. But you really want to try to backdate that a couple weeks from first. So you really almost need a year of data before you start doing it properly on a certain piece of property. And a lot of the good thing is we're the majority of the people out there that are wanting to do this are extremely educated, and they've done their homework. They've got a pretty good handle on when things happen on their property. So I try to time it as close to that fawn drop as I can and create that void. And it's been working extremely well for the types of properties that I've been doing it on. Like I said, I don't know what else to say other than
Sure.
It's called anecdotal evidence by a lot of academia.
Yeah.
But it's on boots on the ground, seeing it with your own eyeballs and seeing it work.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the logic in it would be if you can picture a 3 to 4 week period where the majority of fawns are being dropped. And during that period, let's say the week or two leading up to it, and throughout that period, you are actively removing coyotes from the area. You would think that you're getting those fawns to a time frame in life that they're able to be more mobile, escape predators better, thus making it higher recruitment.
No doubt. It almost seems...
It's just logic.
It almost seems like you could even just distract them for that time. Like, even if you just went out and dropped some cow carcasses around your property, like, fawn recruitment would probably be way better.
I don't know if I do that because that's just attracting more.
Do you think?
Yeah. And maybe not, because that time of year, everything's warming up.
Sure.
And their diet's maybe changing. They're not requiring as much protein. If you did that in January, you'd have, in my part of the world, you'd have every coyote within 10 miles.
Yeah.
And where are you, Case?
West Central Illinois.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what you start to look at, because we had a couple people commenting, they were basically saying, like, they know that they've got healthy rodent populations or rabbit populations or stuff like that. And they're wondering, with those kind of being a main dietary, need for a coyote, does having increased populations of that offset some of the predation on fawns? I mean, I think ultimately you just got to realize that a coyote's an opportunistic hunter. They don't want to waste energy when they don't have to. And they want to be able to, locate prey and capture prey as quickly and as efficient as possible. And when you get to where, those female coyotes are rearing pups, the energy demands from that pack is extremely high, like very high.
Yep. And they do move back in. That's a known fact. I mean, that's the oldest rule in the book when you're trapping is it's like mowing your yard. And the more you do it, the more they're going to come back, and you got to stay on it. You got to be dedicated to it. As far as how long it takes for those animals to move back in, I think every property is different, and it depends on how that property lays, within the landscape. If you back out your 30,000 foot view, and if you've got a river that runs along it, maybe you have more coyotes that would move in quicker just because of the travel routes to and from it. And like I said, every property that I trap is different. For example, a large property that I trap in South Texas, it's 18,000 acres. I used to do it twice a year, and I would go like late January for 2 weeks, and then I would come back mid-March. Late January, I'd like to be there because it's colder. Those coyotes, and it's kind of on the tail end or the start of the breeding season, so they're traveling a bunch, and I'm trying to knock out a large population as I can because they're traveling good. South Texas, you go back down there in March, and it's 95 degrees in the middle of the day, and their dietary needs are changing a little bit. They're starting to set up their home range a little bit tighter, and you're not typically going to catch as many then. But whenever I would do that place twice a year, and this is it, and I don't know if this is indicative of any other property, but on this specific one, I'd go in January and I would kill, say, 60 coyotes off of this one property, and you'd go back in March and you'd kill like 8. That's on 18,000 acres of a very intense, like 150 to 200 miles a day on a side-by-side, driving from daylight to dark, checking traps, doing nothing but checking traps. It's not just a hobby, and we're running a few here and there and running hot spots. We're canvassing an area and doing this from daylight to dark. It wears you out. Like, I feel like when you're in South Texas, you feel like a piece of beef jerky at the end of the day because it's, like I said, 90 degrees and 20% humidity, and you drink 2 gallons of water, and it's quite the deal. But yeah, so like we'd kill 60 in January, and then by March, you'd think you might kill, half, but we really wouldn't even make it to the halfway mark. So,
and that's a few years in a row. A few years in a row that would happen, Case.
Yeah, that was
interesting.
So I've been trapping that place for 10 years, and now we don't even do it twice a year because we've kind of gathered some data on how quick they move back in. And the same goes for, so like the nest predators off that place, you know, when we first started doing it, I mean, crap, we might kill 400 to 800 raccoons off the place.
Wow.
And now it's hard to find 100 of them.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, because I think the thought process is the sponge effect, right? That you would remove predators out of that area, and because the prey, you know, still stays there, new predators move in. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure there is a period of that over time, but eventually, you know, whether you just reduce the landscape level population or they learn that if they go over there, they're going to die. I don't know.
Another thing, like, I don't know if there's been any research done on as far as like how coyotes can manipulate their breeding patterns and if they can self-adjust how many pups they're having. But that's one thing that I observed off that specific place was I was pulling fetuses off every female that I caught, or I would check them and I was counting. Mm-hmm. And when I first started doing it, you know, I would pull, you know, 3 to 4 fetuses out of a female. And within 3 years, it was up to 9.
Wow.
9 to 11. But the overall coyotes that I would catch wasn't more because I was constantly keeping pressure on them. Mm-hmm. They were trying to adjust to it. Now, if you'd have waited a year or two to trap again, then you would have an issue.
Yeah.
This is management. This is kind of like micromanagement to a T. You've just got to stay on it. Once you commit to doing it, you've got to do it.
Do you think when you saw, obviously it's just theoretical because we're looking at what you saw in observation data, but do you think seeing like 3-4 pups and then looking later at 9, you think that also was in check with resources and competition?
That's possible. It's possible. And I don't, like I said, I'm not a scientist. I don't know if their body knows or they can feel the social pressure around them, and they know that they need to reproduce more to flood the, just to create more, or if they had more of a food source and they were healthier. I did a seminar a couple weeks ago. I talked to Stretch about it on their podcast the other day. That the lady brought up the question of, well, doesn't a trapping program create healthier animals and they breed more? And I'm like, yeah. Isn't that what we all want? Is a healthier population of animals across the board, no matter what it is?
Sure.
And it was like a light bulb turned on her head. It's like, yeah, I mean, that works. That works for them. It works for us.
Yeah.
I just think in some areas we're at a point in predator populations, and this is not a broad scale. This is just on some of the properties that I've seen where I live. And I just did this, the raccoon trapping thing a couple weeks ago. But I think on some of these farms, we're at a population now that is so overwhelming that if any kind of a disease comes through on those, there's gonna be dead stuff everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's not sustainable. So to go to this, I don't know if you want to talk about that as far as the raccoon trapping goes.
Sure.
What I did here in Illinois. I guess we could start at the beginning. So earlier this spring, I was running some trail cameras trying to find turkeys to hunt, trying to figure out what farms had huntable populations, because I know that our population is low enough now that I don't want to just go in and kill the Mohican. I don't want to go in and kill the only gobbling bird that's on a particular piece of property. So I was running some trail cameras, and this one particular farm had a cell cam, and it was every night just raccoons. It was unbelievable. And I had no bait out. And that's another, people have criticized me for doing what I did, saying that I baited those raccoons in there or I was running bait sites. I had zero bait out. It's all 100% natural. I had no intention of doing this and turning it into what it turned into.
Right. What, were you just running those on like strut zones that you had mowed or something, or?
Yeah, just the edge of a cut cornfield.
Cut cornfield.
Cool. In a creek bottom, typically there's turkeys that roost up on the ridge. They fly down in the field, and I was trying to figure out how many we had.
Yep.
And anyway,
I have those if you need.
So like I said, me and the wife, we had our second child. I was kind of stuck around home. I couldn't do any traveling. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to hunt that farm for turkeys this year. We're just not going to do it. There's nothing, there's not a huntable population there. So I'm going to try to take care of some predators, control what you can control. And that's one thing I know how to do. So I went out there with the sole intention of not setting a bunch of traps and making it unrealistic for the average guy. I wanted to show what anybody can do. They can go to the farm store, buy a couple dozen traps, and go set them on their 40-acre piece.
Are you just using coon cuffs, basically, Casey?
Yeah, Duke dog proofs.
Yeah.
I had some. They call them coon daggers.
Yeah.
Same concept.
Same thing.
Yep. I had some live traps as well, and just using plain old cat food, nothing else. It's the easiest form of trapping known to man.
Yeah.
You can take kids out there and let them do it. You don't have to worry about scent control. You don't have to do any dirt work. You basically just drive the anchor and set it, and you want the trap to be visible.
Yep.
A lot of guys will paint them white, paint them orange, paint them red, paint them silver. I'll even take a chicken egg and stick it on top of it. That was one thing, and I might be able to actually pull this up and show it to you, the video feed. On one of the traps that I set, I set the trap at 4:44 p.m. and at 8:11, a raccoon showed up and was looking across the food plot at the egg sticking on top of the trap. See if I can find this here. Here it is. You may not be able to see it. Can you see?
Uh-huh.
So that's the side by side. That's me. And then if you look right behind the side by side, you can see the egg on the trap.
Yep. Oh yeah.
That is 3.5 hours later.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And he earned him a real nice shiny bracelet. But I think that's one thing that they kind of key on this time of year. That's a high protein food source for them.
Sure. And
if they can smell them or find them or see them, they're gonna do whatever they can to take advantage of it. So I just kind of got lost in a rambling moment there.
We're talking about trapping coons off that.
And you started, when was that? That was May that you started putting those traps out?
Yeah, it was middle of May.
Okay.
And it was late. But like I said, we had a baby, and I was kind of stuck, and I wanted to do it around the first part of April.
And was that in theory to try to, same thing with fawn recruitment, try to cover when those first nests are being laid?
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly. Yeah. If you can do that, if I could have got those 10 days in right prior to the hens starting to build their nests, I think it maybe would have been better. But I've also seen hens on nests here
right now.
Middle of June. I've actually watched a hen hatch out a nest on the 4th of July.
Yeah, multiple clutches. For sure.
Yeah. So this particular farm, it's 180 acres, and there's a creek bottom kind of on the south 80, and it's a 20-acre agricultural field. And in Illinois, to be able to get a nuisance permit for that time of year, it has to be agricultural based. And I had proof of coons walking around in that field digging up, all the corn that was left there, and it's getting ready to get planted again. And they're going to be out there digging up the seed.
Mm-hmm.
So that was grounds for being able to do that. Plus, my grandma and grandpa live, half a mile up the road, and she's got a big giant garden, and they were steadily going out there and digging up all of her plants. So we had video or picture proof of that too, and here we go. So I wanted to really concentrate my efforts around that bottom field because I know there's a lot. I've always had turkeys nest, right along the creek bank or just off of it or up towards the pasture. And if anybody knows anything about raccoons, they love to walk down a creek.
Mm-hmm.
It's their natural habitat, and that creek bottom connects into several hundred acres of large hardwood timber.
Mm-hmm.
So I went and just drove my side-by-side down along the edge of it. I released the first part of this video yesterday of setting the traps, and it's not rocket science. You basically just drive along the edge, and there's a trail that comes out, pop in at least 2 traps at each spot. I did that. I think I set 30 traps total on like 12 locations.
Okay.
And the first night I caught 21. I actually was writing this down because it was blowing my mind. I quit counting I didn't quit counting. I quit writing down after 7 days, but there's the count.
Jeez.
Day 1 was 21 raccoons and possums and 30 traps, which is unbelievable.
That's crazy, man.
Day 2 was 18. Day 3 was 18. Day 4 was 9. 5 was 10. 6 was 14. 7 was 14. So that in and of itself tells you there's an issue.
Yeah.
When anybody that's ever ran a raccoon line, and this is how I started trapping when I was, young. When you run a trap line for raccoons, especially in the fall, the population is not sustainable for that amount of nights to catch that many.
Mm-hmm.
In those given areas that you're setting those traps. Usually within 3 to 4 days, that line falls apart.
Yep.
And it's not efficient to drive and check those traps anymore. You're burning more gas than you're making on the fur that you're catching.
Mm-hmm.
But that line held together for 10 solid days. I ended up catching 119 raccoons off of 120-acre field.
Wow. That's crazy.
That is alarming.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. And people have asked me, what would a population be on that one field where it wouldn't alarm you? I don't know, but I mean, even if I would have caught 40 around that one field,
sure,
that would have been a lot. I mean, when you're talking, say, for example, that 18,000 acre place that I trapped back in February of this year, I killed 93 off the whole place.
Jeez.
And that place is feeding protein and corn feeders on every road, and you would think that's drawing them in, but I've continually been trapping that place. This place here, this farm that I did here in Illinois, and where I caught these 119, that place gets trapped every, say, December when I'm there trapping coyotes. I don't trap it hard for raccoons, but I do set probably 2 or 3 dozen traps for 4 raccoons around my coyotes. That's just to keep the coons out of the coyote set.
Right, from digging it up.
We'll kill maybe 20 that time of year, but you get a lot of refusals in the fall because there's so many other food sources.
Mm-hmm.
Like that whole field back in November would have had how many tons of corn laying there.
Right.
They don't have to go stick their hand in that trap. But when you're doing this in the springtime, there's no mass crops, there's no berries. Most of the corn in the field is gone or it's rotted away. So, and they're trying to, they're coming off of winter time, or they're getting ready to have to feed a bunch of young, and they're hungry, and they're really, really easy to catch that time of year.
I mean, Casey, what do you think? Why do you think these populations are getting so out of whack right now? Is it just because there hasn't been as much trapping in the last several decades, or habitat, or, what's the cause?
I don't know exactly what the deal is. I know there's not as much trapping going on, which in this part of the world where this farm was at, there's really never been any other trappers there that I know of. And I know most of the neighbors. The only difference would be, say, 15 years ago, you could go out there on any night in November or December and hear coon dogs running somewhere. But that's really not happening anymore. There was a couple of local farmers that had kids that were about my age that did that a lot back then, and now they've grown up, moved away, and they're not doing it. And then, and if you look at the general landscape of Illinois, there's so much of this land that's being leased and outfitted. They don't want a coon dog hunter or anybody in there trapping. And I don't know if there's just been more of a food source for them, or I don't know if there's other factors that are making them, if they're just healthier and they're breeding. I don't know exactly what it is without, making it a full-time job to try to figure out what exactly is going on.
Yeah.
It's just hard to say, but all I know is this farm was not an anomaly.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time I was trapping that place, I was trapping my in-laws farm, and the habitat for raccoons on it is not as good. It's an 80-acre farm. The front 40 is all flat tillable, and then it kind of drops off into a couple brushy draws. There's really not a lot of big hardwoods in it for cavities for den sites. There's just a lot of travel through it because I get, pictures of raccoons all the time. In that same 10-day period, I killed like 84 off of it. And I've continued to trap it up around the house because my kids and my nephews are there, and my mother-in-law is just worried to death that a coon is going to come up in the yard and bite one of them. So I've been running some around the pond, and I think as of yesterday, I'm at 112 off that farm.
Wow.
So,
yeah, I mean, it just seems crazy because I'm sure it isn't an anomaly. I think there's probably a lot of farms that have that many coons and possums on it, and I don't know if it's just this year, but I mean, we've heard a lot more chatter out of people in the Midwest saying that, I didn't see any turkeys this year.
Yeah. And I don't think we can blame it 100% on raccoons.
Sure.
Let's go ahead and throw that out there, because I've had people criticize me for that, saying, "Oh, well, you're just a professional trapper trying to get more business and get people to hire you." No, I'm not. I don't want any more business. Do not call me, because I don't have time to do it. I'm doing this out of the fact that I am scared to death that in 5 more years, it's going to be hard to find a turkey in the state of Illinois. And like I said, I don't think that it's 100% the raccoon or possum's fault, but it's not helping. And I know that we need to control what we can control. I think habitat is a big issue. And there's a lot of habitat elitists out there that tell me that I am 100% wrong. But when you look at the landscape for West Central Illinois, just for example, and the average people that are out here, I don't know what the percentage would be, but there's a very, very large percentage of the land mass that cannot be fixed habitat-wise.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly because, say you've got a lease and someone else owns it, and you can't do anything with the habitat, but you can go buy you a couple dozen traps and try to take care of a predation problem. This farm that I caught the 119 off of, it's my grandpa's farm. It's an agricultural based farm. He doesn't want to do any kind of habitat work. He wants to cut hay. He wants to, farm the crops. So I'm handcuffed. I'm handcuffed with that. So that throws the habitat, like my option to do any kind of habitat work, out the window.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, you look at 10 years ago, we had more turkeys than we knew what to do with. And I've ran trail cameras on that same farm for the last 15 years. And the only difference that I have seen is the amount of predators on that property. And we're just talking about raccoons.
Sure.
The amount of coyotes that are on that farm is astounding. You can't kill enough of them right there, just because I don't have a large enough landmass to really take care of that, or enough time. But there's another aspect of trapping that doesn't get talked about, and it doesn't get talked about by the researchers, and it's really immeasurable. There's no way to build a graph for this, and that's the stress that predators put on animals. And I've got really good examples of this. I've got 2 farms. One, they're 20 miles apart. Okay. One of them, we don't have, for whatever reason, a large population of coyotes. And let's just talk about deer.
Mm-hmm.
That farm, you can go bow hunt that farm, and deer walking around in the middle of the day, just leisurely. They have not a care in the world. They're not looking over their shoulder. You go back to this farm where I killed the 119 raccoons, and I just told you that there's more coyotes on that farm than there is deer. I'm convinced of it, just based off of trail camera video and pictures. You go and hunt that farm in November, and those deer, it's like they're jacked up on meth. Their heads on a swivel. They're constantly moving. They're constantly looking. They get any sort of whiff of you, and they're gone. And the deer just act totally different on those 2 farms. The only difference that I can see myself, anecdotal evidence, is the predator numbers. They're totally different.
Sure.
So I think that's a big thing, when you talk about predator populations and a trapping program, is think about the stress they cause.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that doesn't apply to a turkey as far as the nest predators, but on a coyote, think about a turkey that's gobbling in the springtime. I know a lot of places in the Southeast that people complain, you get 2 weeks into the season and the turkey's going to gobble. Well, that's because every time they gobble, they end up either getting shot by you or seeing you sneak up on them.
Sure.
The same goes with a coyote. The coyotes are going to a turkey gobbling. So, think about that. Also think about the timing of the year for a coyote. Whenever it gets cold out and they got to eat, and they're chasing deer in the middle of January. And, if you don't have good cover, or you have a high number of predators on a certain piece of property, when deer come out to eat in the evenings and it's 0 degrees out, think about a coyote coming through and running them out of the field. And then they got to spend the energy to run out and get back to cover.
Yeah.
So, trapping is just one small portion of the puzzle. And I think it is something that we need to really focus on.
I think when you start looking at the ability on a property to control predators, if we think about like coons first, a coyote can cover miles really fast. Coons, possums, skunks, they can cover ground, but they're not moving very far. So if you can put that consistent pressure from a trapping standpoint and a removal standpoint on it, I could easily see the positive impacts on nesting ground nesting birds. On the coyote level is where, as you start to put that pressure on, if people within a coyote's range are not putting that trapping pressure on, ultimately it's up to you, because you're just going to continue to suck them in. I feel like.
Well, the geographic difference is odd too, or like the perception of the turkey numbers is like, because we've talked to, we're here in Pennsylvania, like northeastern part of the state. We've talked to some guys from the South, and like this observation of reduced turkey numbers or less turkeys seems to be fairly isolated to like the Midwest. And in terms of like these differences that we're talking, again, those are perceptions, just guys' opinions. In terms of like what we've talked about being contributing factors to that, like trapping pressure, predator numbers, like I'm struggling to see the difference between like either of those 2 regions, the Southeast or the Northeast, as compared to the Midwest. And like, so I'm trying to figure out if not predators, why is that? What would be the die-off of turkeys in the Midwest?
Could be disease. The rough grouse, it's been West Nile virus, or at least that's what they point to.
Yeah. Well, but I don't hear a lot of guys saying they're finding a bunch of turkeys dead either. They're just saying, well, I'm just seeing less of them.
Yeah, if there's a lot of scavengers, though,
sure,
probably aren't going to find them dead.
Maybe. But like with deer with disease, like, a lot of people say they find them dead.
Find them dead, for sure.
Yeah, they're bigger. Maybe it takes longer for them to decompose or whatever, but.
Yeah, I don't know. The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Stealth Cam.
dude, where would we be without our cell cams?
I would definitely be divorced at this point.
Yeah, I hear that.
I mean, the fact is I spent more time checking cameras than I actually did hunting prior to cell cameras. Now, at least, my wife can enjoy me being in the comfort of my own home, buried in my phone, checking those pictures.
Yeah, 100%. And dude, when it comes to trail cameras and definitely cell cameras, reliability is, I think, the number one thing that we're looking for. Stealth Cam just has a long reputation of reliable cameras, and ultimately that is the most important thing to us. They have to work.
In terms of reliability, there's not a better camera on the market than Stealth Cam, whether you're talking about the Fusion X, the Reactor, or the DS4K Transmit. And most of them are under $200.
Stealthcam.com. Check them out.
And I mean, does it seem like, Casey, because you're hunting the Midwest more than Jared and I are, especially for turkeys. Does it seem like it's been, a gradual decline, or like, one year you wake up and you're like, where the hell are all the turkeys?
It's been a gradual decline. I would say probably 2010 to 2012 was maybe the peak on the farms that I can hunt. This particular farm that I trapped 119 off of, that bottom would have, it was almost like we had an overpopulation of turkeys. It was insane. There'd be like 10 to 15 birds gobbling in that bottom.
Wow.
It was wild. It was almost like South Texas. It was like a turkey farm. And you'd hear another 15 to 20 in the distance. It was pretty dang neat. But just over the last 10 years, if you pay attention, 1 year it'd be down to 7 or 8, and then 4 or 5, and then 2 or 3, and to this year I don't know if we had a turkey roosting over that bottom. My cameras, I had like one gobbler that would come through once every 10 days. And typically that's an everyday, all day spot for turkeys to be. It's just, I don't, go ahead.
Well, one thing that's, definitely happening is trapping is declining as like a recreational activity,
Sure.
like, and as a market, like obviously at one time that was like a thing. People trapped, like, seems like all of our dads at some point had a dozen, 2 dozen foothold, 1.5s hanging somewhere. And like trapping was a thing that people did. Yep. And now it's like there's maybe 10%, as opposed to like 20 years ago.
It takes time. You gotta, like I said, you gotta be dedicated to it. It's fun. When you got a trap line out, especially in the wintertime, there's nothing better than trapping in the wintertime when the animals have, all their fur and they're prime and they're beautiful. And then you get to take that animal back and skin it out, and you've got a product to go back and sell. There's something extremely fulfilling about that.
Yeah.
But we've really gotten away from that. And now there's no market. You're talking about, say that 2000, back whenever I was getting started, I got a couple dozen dog-proof traps for Christmas, and me and Dad started trapping. We'd kill, 250 to 300 and take that and sell it. And you're like, man, this is cool. We weren't looking at the net. We were looking at the gross of what we made,
Sure.
But we'd take that money and we'd go buy more traps with it. And it was just, I don't know, it was fulfilling.
Yeah.
But now, you could go out and kill 200 or 300 raccoons, and you might find somebody to buy them for $2 a piece.
Crazy.
Maybe. And most of all the buyers around here stopped buying. The country buyers, like there was local guys that were doing it. And then you look at like Grunewald Fur and Auction. They're the largest fur buyer in North America now, and they quit doing their fur routes in November and December. That's bad. You want people to stop trapping, get rid of the people buying.
For sure.
But now, like I said, we're to a point where we've got so many of them. We've got to change a mindset, I believe. What's a turkey worth to you? And like I said, this is not end all be all going to save the turkey. I'm not saying that.
Sure.
Can't do anything but help. If we left that farm alone and we keep 119 raccoons coming to one field, that's definitely not helping the situation leaving them there.
Well, it's peculiar too that, like, you know, hunting, I know there's like dispute over the numbers, but it sure seems like there's almost more hunters than ever.
I mean, that's where I was about to
and
go.
Deer, and like to say that there's maybe 10% of trap. I mean, the idea and like maybe the big picture answer is like there's a value assigned to a white-tailed deer or a turkey in terms of like a trophy sense, you know, whether you want to attribute that to the Crockett Club or Pope and Young or the industry, you know, and the way it had progressed there.
I think good.
No, I was just going to say that doesn't exist. You know, for coyotes, it's always just kind of been a numbers game, or, you know, it was a market that's kind of since, diminished.
I think predators obviously have a huge impact here, but I have to wonder, because data is slow, states are even slower to make changes. You know, in 2020 and 21, we had, you know, highest numbers of hunters in the country. Is that having a more significant impact? And again, it's not the only reason, but paired with increased predators and all these other things, that our populations are not sustainable this way. There's too many hunters, there's too many predators, and because of all that, and less habitat, because of those three things, because everybody we talk to from a state agency says, yeah, well, you know, we have more hunters, but our resource can support it. I don't think it can.
Well, when we talk about adaptability, you know, like a white-tailed deer seems to be able to thrive amongst urban sprawl and increased hunting pressure, and these birds don't seem as as resilient. You know, look at pheasant populations.
Buck's not gobbling in the middle of the rut.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
If a deer gobbled and you knew where he was at every morning, it'd be a different story.
Sure.
That's for sure.
I mean, because Aaron and those guys caught shit about it. You know, like, oh, you guys are driving all these people to the public lands and they're now killing all our birds. I'm not saying that they are, but I think that the larger numbers of people that have been hunting in 2020 and 21 for sure have had an effect on populations. Now, pair that with, in terms of turkeys, raccoons, skunk, opossum populations being extremely high, loss of habitat or fragmentation of habitat. All of those things are going to lead to the demise of these birds, for sure.
Yeah. Well, in states like Pennsylvania, that's despite a lot of effort and money being put into increasing
recruitment
turkey habitat.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah.
Habitat. Like, I know the state of Pennsylvania puts a lot, I'm sure a majority of their license
so does NWTF.
Into improving turkey habitat. And, I mean, granted, we haven't, you know, it doesn't seem like turkeys are at risk here as much as, I mean, as much as like maybe you guys are observing in the Midwest. And I don't know, I'm just trying to figure out why that might be.
Yeah.
You talk about changing people's mindset. I mean, there's so many people out there that have the take mentality.
Sure.
You know, Illinois, we've got to, you know, apply for tags and get tags for deer and turkeys. And, you know, we can get up to 3 tags.
Mm-hmm.
I had 3 tags this year. I filled one of them. I could have went and tried to fill the other 2, but I didn't.
Yeah.
Just because you can buy those 3 tags, or you have 3 tags. Yeah, you spent what, $20 or $25 on a tag.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to fill it.
Yeah.
I mean, let's try to change that mentality of take to let's take a little, let's give a little back.
We had this conversation, Casey, not that long ago, when it was like, how do you, because the state agency is managing from a landscape level. So if they say, hey, Casey, you can kill 3 turkeys with your tags, there's nobody on the micro level to manage it and say, you can, but you shouldn't, right? It literally comes down to us as hunters to...
You gotta have a conscience.
That's it. And unfortunately, and it's no knock to hunters, 90% of them, if it's legal to kill X amount, they'll kill X amount.
Or more.
Yeah.
That's
well,
it.
and that's the, you know, the nature of public land too, is that like us as hunters,
mm-hmm.
and if we are conservationists too, like what ability do you have to reinvest into public land other than paying for your license?
Not much.
Yeah. And so, you know, you're at a position there to basically trust your whoever's doing those projects,
mm-hmm.
state agencies, you know, to use that money to improve it. But I mean,
And the same goes with deer. I mean, we had this conversation about deer not too long ago where it was like, all right, Jared, you can shoot 7 does with your license, right, in Ohio or wherever. Your property may not sustain the harvest of 7 does. So at the level of the micro management, you have to make the conscious decision to say, okay, I can shoot 7, but my farm's not ready for 7. 90% of hunters out there aren't capable of processing that. They're going to only say, well, if the state says I should kill 7 or can kill 7, then that's what I'm aiming for.
Yeah. Well, and in my situation, it's like the opposite. It's like I should probably shoot 25 of them, but the state will allow me to shoot 6.
That's because they're trying to find an average. They can't say, hey, everybody can kill up to 25.
Well, and most people don't, even try to understand, let alone actually understand like the dynamics of their property or what a healthy herd should look like. So it's, I understand why maybe they don't give people
given the success rates are low. Like I know in Missouri at one time when you could kill 3 bucks, it was like, X% killed 1. The majority of people killed 1.
Yeah.
Then it was like 3% or less killed 2, and it was like 0.007% that killed 3 bucks, like filled 3 buck tags. But because the state made it legal to kill 3 bucks, everybody was out there with the mentality of, I'm going to kill 3 bucks this year. So this is where it comes back on that state agency mindset of like, I know you want opportunity. I know you want participation. But some of these populations of game, I think turkeys, I think rough grouse is one, aren't as responsive to the pressure up and down on the hunting when the predator pressure is also substantial, right? They can't bounce back as fast as a white-tailed deer maybe can. But given the fact that, what we're talking about here, who's to say that in 5 years we're not having the same discussion about white-tailed deer where predator numbers are so high, hunting pressure is increased because maybe people can't hunt turkeys anymore, so the only thing they can hunt is deer. And now we're having the same discussion about deer because the resource can't sustain the pressure.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, I don't know. Like,
so as an example, I went on a Florida turkey hunt this year.
Mm-hmm.
To try killing Osceola. I got invited down by a good friend, and he knows he's a 100% public land guy in the state of Florida, and Florida has limited draw quota hunts for certain management areas. I knew nothing about it, but he knows all the ins and outs and how to apply and the tags or the point systems and all that stuff. And he got drawn. We went down there and hunted. The first 2 days we hunted one of these limited draw quota hunts. It was unbelievable. Like managed to a T, burned, timber thinned, cut lane roads. It was beautiful, and turkeys gobbling everywhere. And we killed a turkey. The first day we killed a turkey at 11:30 in the morning, and he was gobbling his brains out like 90 yards from a parking area on public ground.
Yeah.
Why do you think that place is so good?
Yeah.
Because it's a limited draw hunt.
Yep.
Like that specific place, they only give out like 9 tags for the whole.
There you go.
Week.
Yep.
But then you've got public land guys in Alabama that are hunting huge tracts of land, and they're like, "Well, we don't have any turkeys." And I'm like, "Well, we just left a limited quota hunt that was unbelievable, but now you're talking out of this side of the mouth about how good that was, and then you're talking out of this side of the mouth about how you can't go back and hunt for 14 days after you kill your first bird on a management area, but yet you're also bitching because there's not any turkeys there. They're all on the private land. That's because there's so many of you pushing them and killing them.
Yep. And when that goes back
there's
to
a very clear distinction between states that prioritize
quality.
Well, their wildlife over hunter opportunities. Like
dollars.
Iowa and Kansas are obviously Iowa first and foremost is like, man, how long does it take to draw a tag there? But their white-tailed deer, trophy quality is off the charts. I mean, it's the highest in the state. Missouri would be your contrast to that. They're obviously prioritizing opportunity. And while it could or probably should be the biggest whitetail state in the country, it's not.
It's not. Yeah. Well, and I think that as you kind of look at those things, it goes back to, on public land especially, There's only so many people that can fit in a piece of public land. And there are no restrictions on most of them, unless it's a quota hunt or a draw hunt. There are no restrictions. It could be 100 acres and 20 guys could go hunt that.
Yeah.
That's not sustainable for that wildlife population using that 100 acres. But there's nobody to say you can't do it.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. I think we see that across the country right now. You know, now this will be the first year that I think we start dipping back down to reality numbers for hunters. But it may take 2 years to bounce back from what we experienced the last 2-3 years of hunting.
Do you know if Kansas has released its draw
Statistics?
stats yet?
I don't know. I haven't looked.
Let me see if you can find that, Nick.
It was
Just,
high.
I'm trying.
again.
I want to know how many people put in for Kansas whitetail
Super
tags
high again. Yeah.
as compared to last year.
But yeah, I mean, I don't, I don't know where we go from there, but it's multitude of factors. We all know that. I think predators are a big piece of that. I think hunter numbers. And the crazy thing is, what have we been hearing for the last 20 years is, retain, recruit, what's the other one?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's recruitment. Reactivation.
Yeah.
It just get hunters back going again. That's what we've been hearing for 20 years. COVID hits, numbers skyrocket, and I mean, given I don't know how you could prepare for it, but we sure as shit weren't prepared for it, and we just kind of let it do what it did. The only state that I would say, and I don't know about other ones, the one state I do know that made a choice was during the first spring 2020 when COVID hit.
There's two of them I can think
They
of.
Canceled.
Kansas canceled. Turkey
And
season.
Kentucky canceled my turkey, non-resident turkey tag.
One of the Dakotas canceled one too.
I think.
Who did?
Nebraska.
Nebraska. So
Yeah.
so all of a sudden, and
Well, that was because of COVID, though. They're like, well, we don't want people to get COVID.
exactly.
while
We
they're
don't
turkey
want
hunting.
we don't want interstate stuff and stuff. But because they did that, they preserved a lot of birds
Yeah.
through to the next spring.
Yeah.
And so if you look at those states, Kentucky being one, man, I was in birds all year this year.
I know, man.
And maybe it's still not as good as it could have been, but it's better because they canceled one spring and we had one spring of inflated hunter numbers. States like Illinois, Pennsylvania, Missouri, Oklahoma, all these states that had just wide open and increased pressure, man, I think they're going to feel it for at least 2 more years until this thing can hopefully bounce back.
Yeah. Well, and dude,
So,
the fact.
looking here, sorry, Jared.
You're right.
Looking here, I don't think they have updated stats yet. I can continue to look for this year, but last year it was 174,000.
Okay.
Yep.
Does that seem about
Nothing
right?
for this year yet.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything. I'm trying to look here.
So they just
how
pulled
about
the draws.
How about 2020? And that's 174,000
Total.
applicants statewide.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many tags are available?
I mean, our unit was
Yeah, I don't know.
86 or 87% success rate at one point. Last year, I think it went down to 68%.
So maybe like 120,000
Mm-hmm.
statewide.
Yep.
So it
Success rate
seems
on
that
the
it's
draw or
declining.
success rate on the kill?
Success rate on the draw.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I mean, most of those units were 100% at one point.
And so what I was going to say is I think it's a problem that not that I think it should be like a federal decision because it's probably worse, but one negative is that you've got states not on the same page with that decision making. And so a very real decision that we made and that I've seen a lot of people consequently making is that so a state like Kansas, who I think is prioritizing their wildlife by limiting the number of tags that they'll issue, is just driving more people into states that are not making that same decision, like Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like if you don't draw Iowa or Kansas,
you got Illinois.
everybody goes to Shawnee National Forest.
Yeah.
And then you've got 500 guys.
Yeah, and I mean, people have heard us make this statement before, but it's because I just have never seen anything like it. Now, given that was the first time I hunted Southern Illinois.
It's terrible.
I mean, it was packed to the gills. Like, even if you wanted to hike 2 miles back into...
And we did.
Yeah, you couldn't find a parking space in some spots.
Every single spot was actively being hunted or had been hunted. And I'm sure there's like some deer down there that found some holes, but...
Yeah, buried in the cypress swamps.
Yeah, that was rough.
The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Hoyt Archery.
Dude, where would we be without our Hoyt bows?
Probably shooting crossbows.
or a Matthews, yeah.
One and the same.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, we love being Hoyt guys because you stand out. When you're in this room full of other people that shoot these other types of bows, I feel like the Hoyt guys just stick out.
Dude, it's just a legit bow. I mean, especially that carbon riser, man. I mean, I know that they've got several other aluminum lines as well, but for me, I'm shooting that RX5 in the carbon model. They've since come out with the RX7, and I can't tell you how much I love being a Hoyt guy amongst a sea full of Matthews guys. So we're out there, I think, proving them wrong, shooting 80 pounds and killing stuff.
Hey, man, if you want to get serious, get Hoyt.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of, I guess, experience hunting public ground, but one thing that was really cool about hunting Florida with those guys is it was like totally opposite of the horror stories that have heard about of people busting up on you. But like mid-morning before we killed our turkey, we were driving around. We'd park at a parking spot. We'd walk in and we'd try to strike up a turkey. If we didn't, we'd go to another spot. And if there was a truck there, he'd be like, let's not bother him. We've got more spots. I was like, that's cool.
Yeah.
To the point where we had two strutters on the side of the road, and we went past them and they didn't run off. They gobbled at the truck when we hit a pothole, and we went up and parked, and we seen a guy in a ground blind, and he's like, let's get in the truck. We don't want to bother that guy.
Yeah.
I was like, amen, man.
And I think that's what you want. Whereas most places, no, they hear a bird gobble and there's 5 guys heading your direction.
Yeah.
Oh, we could have cut that guy off so easy and killed those turkeys, but we didn't. We got back in the truck and left, waved at him in the blind. We were just out of sight of the turkeys, but it was pretty neat. It was refreshing to actually see that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's cool that there's certain things that exist like that. I know Mississippi does a lot of draw hunts. I used to participate in those when I lived down there. And there's other areas that do too. But as a whole, and maybe it's because we never thought we would have to say, wait a minute, do we have too many hunters for the resources we have available? That's very possible because we've been saying we need more, we need more, we need more. And I think what's happened there is in the 1980s and 90s, open access to private land was pretty common. I mean, you just went and hunt farms in the neighborhood and nobody cared. Now, because of outfitters and purchasing it for hunting and recreation, access is shut down. And so you're forcing those people who don't have access to private land to public. That's all they have left. And I think those things have now kind of converged to where you're jamming 5 pounds of shit in a 1 pound bag.
That's an interesting way to put it. Because just like I said, states are making decisions to limit their number of hunters. Essentially, private landowners are essentially doing that, not knowing.
I just had a conversation this morning with the tenant or the son of the tenant that I have on my Ohio farm, who said, "Well, would you buy it for just deer hunting?" And I said, "Well, yeah." Family, and I'm turkey hunting, I'm gonna manage it. He's like, cool, so I can hunt it too? I thought he was joking. And I was like, no. He's like, oh, I thought you managed it for deer hunting. I was like, well, yeah, for like my family and stuff. He's like, oh, okay. And it's like, but I mean, that I think is the common mindset from the last couple decades is like, oh, just ask and, I've been hunting that, or my dad's been hunting it for 40 years. That is converged down to where, I mean, most places are a no. Or somebody's managing it, or somebody else is hunting and leasing it. And you've jammed all these public land hunters into the same amount of area that they've had for the last 100 years.
And you look at like the stuff that I hunt here. Like I killed my biggest deer I've ever killed last fall on Halloween. And that piece of ground is 40 acres. Well, it's really only probably 25 to 30 acres of brush. Mm-hmm. It's a tiny little spot. And that morning that I killed that deer, I knew of 7 people within 200 acres of me. I mean, that's probably as high of a population count of hunters on a small landmass as a lot of public ground.
Yeah.
80 next to me had 3 guys walking. You see their headlights lamps as I was walking in. One guy was probably within 150 yards of me. I was about right at 100 yards off the fence line.
Wow.
And if you're standing on the fence line, you can see the guy's tree stand. And then the 80 to the north of me had 2 guys. I listened to their 4-wheelers drive in. And then the 80 north of that had 2 more guys on it because it's outfitted.
Doesn't that suck?
I mean, I don't know how we have any mature deer anywhere, but evidently they're pretty good at evading people, or they shoot the first 2 or 3 year old that walks by.
In case
it's highly possible.
We know some guys. John Eberhardt's probably the most notable. That's like, they've really embraced that. The hunting public guys are probably the same. They've embraced that challenge of like, well, this is what hunting is now, especially public land. It's like it's how do you outsmart these other guys? And it's like, while I'm stoked and I'm sure you're stoked that you shot your biggest buck ever. That's awesome. Like, and I don't know how you feel about it, but like I probably would have enjoyed that experience a lot more had I not seen any of them guys.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it is cool that you killed them and nobody else did, but like, man, I'd rather not seen them guys at all.
It's an extra layer that kind of takes away from, you go out and hunt because you want to be alone, peace, like surrounded in the environment, and it's you against him in the stand.
Yeah.
And then this extra layer comes in of, oh shit, Joe just walked in and he's 200 yards this way and Jim's over there.
Yeah. And I'm not saying those guys shouldn't embrace it. I mean, if that's what you have to hunt,
well, that's what I'm saying.
Make the most of it for sure.
I used to worry about it and it drove me nuts, and it started to make hunting not enjoyable to me.
Yeah.
Anymore. I block it all out and I concentrate on what I'm doing. I've got to hunt my places smarter than I ever did. And like I said, I'm just blocking that stuff out, and I've been successful. And yeah, if those guys kill a big deer, high five,
sure.
Good for you.
Yeah.
There will be more deer. They're not my deer. I mean, I'm hunting 40 acres of brush, and I watched him cross that fence line, and I watched him cross that fence line. We're all there to share the deer. But you can't get caught up in that stuff. Otherwise,
I think that's a fortunate exception. Unfortunately, I think there's a lot of places, my family owns some ground that used to have big deer, and, the neighbors have killed them all.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there aren't anymore.
Yeah.
And they're Amish communities, and they kill, there's a lot of people hunting all of the surrounding ground, and they shoot a lot of deer, and they're nice people. They're good people. There's no issue there, but just the nature of their hunting practices has ruined the potential for older age class deer. They're just not there.
Well, and you have to remember, I
think that's pretty common.
Most of these states have seasons and bag limits set up to maximize opportunity for hunting. They don't care about quality of animals and age class of animals. It's not in their mindset. So
it can't be.
Yeah.
Because you look at what they're trying to manage as a whole, and you're never going to make everybody happy.
No.
That's the bottom line.
No. I do think that we have to bring more attention to these variety of factors. And it'd be interesting to see, kind of in a similar way, Casey, is like if you would have gone into, 1,000 acres or 500 acres of public land in Illinois, and you trap the same way, cutting coons out of there, doing that, I'm sure you would see a turkey rebound in those areas. But ultimately, I think that the pressure in that particular like public land area is going to be so great that they're either going to push the birds out, the birds are going to go to better habitat, or they're going to kill them. And so I don't know if the benefit that you would see on public land with a very active trapping effort would be as good as you see it on a piece of private ground.
You're probably right. Yeah, there's actually a big public piece. I used to live in Virginia, Illinois, and it's over near Springfield. There's Jim Edgar Panther Creek. I can't remember how many acres it is. It's 16 or 18,000 acres, and it's got primo habitat as far as, they've got 5,000 or 6,000 acres of grass, of prairie restorated grasslands. They do burns. It's a pretty amazing piece of property, but they actually have that in a draw system where they block off like 5 or 6 chunks of that, and like one person can draw and get the rights to trap that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know exactly how intensive those guys are doing that anymore. And it's at the wrong time, frankly. I mean, you can go in there and knock out a bunch of raccoons in November, and you look at the population in April after they've came out of hibernation and they're traveling a lot and they're dispersing, you're back to square one. That's why I'm so adamant about trapping near the nesting season or near a fawn drop.
Yeah. And I'd imagine, Casey, those seasons are still probably catered towards like a fur market, right?
Exactly. But you're starting to see some states flip around. And I know there's a lot of pushback from, NWTF and state biologists and whatnot, and trapping organizations in themselves, for fear of not representing the sport in the right way. Like I said, we're to a point now where something needs to be done. I hate to waste an animal as much as anybody, but we've got to do something. And I hate it whenever people dismantle the trapping, and totally push people away from management. I like to think of trapping as maybe a vehicle for a lot of people. If a guy decides to start trapping and he goes out to his piece of property and he's spending time on it, and then he starts to see things in a different light rather than just going out and planting a food plot and then he's gone, or he's checking trail cameras and he's gone, or he's walking to his tree stand and he's worried about spooking deer and then he's in and out. But when you start spending some time trapping and you're noticing different things, it changes. Maybe that is the vehicle to change the mindset, where they say, "Oh, there's a 2-acre spot over there. I could do something with that." Or there's this little patch of timber here isn't quite right. I saw this guy talking on a podcast or saw a video, and I feel like we need to do something there. And it just starts to make their brain turn. And it's just using, maybe the trapping isn't the end all be all and save the turkey or save the deer, but it's that vehicle that gets somebody interested into other aspects of management.
Yeah.
Instead of saying trapping is not going to work, you got to focus on the habitat.
Yeah.
Well, don't turn us away, or don't turn a potential new guy away from it. Let him feel it out. Like, encourage it. Get people out there. Get their mind engaged into it. There's nothing more engaging in the outdoors than trapping. I know it's made me a better hunter. I know it's made me more observant.
For sure.
I noticed things that I never would have noticed before I started trapping. And it's hard to explain, but you start to see things, and that's the bottom line.
Yeah. I know it did for me, man. I mean, I started trapping way before I ever picked up a bow. I mean, it's because I was young, and in Pennsylvania, you can't hunt until you're 12. That's when you can take your hunter ed stuff and start going with your dad, basically, or a guardian or whatever. But I mentioned all of our dads probably used to have old foothold traps hanging. That's exactly what happened with mine. Was like in our basement, there was just old. I remember he had all his conibear traps from when muskrats used to be there, and then he had a handful of I don't know what they were, Duke or Bridger 1.5s or something.
Yeah,
and ones and stuff. And like my dad was never a real big trapper, but he had enough that I was like, what are those? And then I eventually bought some more, and we had I just had permission to. I think I got permission. I don't honestly remember, but I went out and sat some, and like the very first traps that I ever set were for coons. And they were all above ground with a piece of bread or a piece of fish that I caught out of a pond.
Marshmallow.
And of course I had a blue jay in the first one because I didn't know, had no idea what I was doing. And so my dad came out and showed me. He's like, okay, well for a coon set, we're gonna put some of these in the creek, and I mean, dude, it was a shit show. I was terrible at it. But the first time I caught two coons, and I had to, at the time, guys just would use a little pole and crack them over the head. And so my dad's instruction was, just whap them on the head, and with your trial, and then just step on their ribs and break the. I'm like, okay, cool, easy. And I was 10, and that didn't work. It's about a half an hour of trying to finish off these coons, and it was not efficient at all. But then to evolve into figuring out how to dispatch them effectively and how to use scent control, and that evolved into trapping for dogs, which was more don't want to say dogs, it's fox and coyotes. There's a lot more fox in that area. And so I can remember my first gray fox ever caught was like a beast. And I was riding my little KLX 110 in about a foot of snow at 4 a.m. before school. And I had like a headlight on, and I come over the hill, and I'm like, getting through all the snow, and there's one, it's jumping all over the place. And I was like freaking out. I had my basket on and stuff. And so I threw my bike down and ran up and have a little pistol 22, and I missed it like 3 times, And, but I mean, that definitely lit a fire in me to just expand on trapping, and ultimately that evolved into bow hunting, and like it's just a progression of like, dude, excitement about being out there and exposure to what those things can offer in terms of like a lifestyle, or whether you call it a hobby or a passion. But trapping was definitely a big part of it for me.
Yep.
So
cool. Well, good deal. Well, listen, man, we appreciate you coming on HUNTR Podcast this week. And I guess you said you just started posting those video series. Where's that? Is that on Management Advantage?
Yep. It'll be on the Management Advantage Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube channel.
If we can,
I solo filmed all this stuff like with a GoPro, so it's kind of different than what I normally do. You can kind of that big camera in the back.
Yeah.
I didn't carry that camera around.
Yeah.
And trapping's dirty, dirty work anyway. I had my hands dirty and
For
mud
sure.
and stuff flying everywhere. So I like I said, I didn't initially start doing this to turn it into what it did. It just kind of snowballed.
Sure.
And I just wanted to document kind of for myself through the GoPro, but it's kind of cool. I mean, it's point of view. There's a little more information in it, I think, than the average highly produced show. And some of them will be a little bit longer, but yeah, I mean, it's pretty neat. I mean, I trapped around that 20-acre field, caught those, and then my grandma and grandpa's yard. I set, I don't know, half a dozen sets in their yard, and ended up killing 22 out of them, and then I did my in-laws' place as well. So it'll end up being pretty neat.
So Casey, I didn't mean to wait till the very end of the podcast here to ask you about it, but what is like the current state of the Management Advantage? Like what are you guys doing with that project? What is your role in that, and what's the future look like?
I'm the editor, producer, videographer, chief cook, bottle washer, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
We've got Eric's part of it. Tom James is part of it. And I know I'll leave some names out. Howard O'Neill, Chuck Sykes is still a minor part of it.
Okay.
But we try to produce a show every 2 weeks, pertinent to the time of year.
Yep.
And just try to inspire people about management. No matter what it is.
And those are primarily on YouTube?
Yeah, YouTube and Facebook and Instagram. We
Cool.
post everything. Crossed all that. So yeah, that's where we're at. We're trucking along. We're low rent, but we do what we can.
So are we.
Yeah, no doubt. Cool.
Yep.
Well,
So,
good deal, man. Well, we appreciate you coming on, and we'll have to catch up with you this fall.
let's do it.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on, Case. We'll, yeah, like you said, man, we, dude, to the trapping thing, it's just a time thing. Like you said, I'm trying to think of a reason why people don't, man.
Time.
It's like, man, if I could take a week, and for me, just because it's like I enjoy it when it's cold and stuff, I realize for the predator management side of things, yeah, right now it's probably better. But, like running a January trap line at the farm would be awesome. I just, how do you find a
Time.
10 days?
Mm-hmm.
You find 10 days to do it.
So whenever I was telling you about what I did on this particular track, I designed it on purpose to make it geared toward the average guy. And I said it in Eric's podcast the other day. I don't want people to be confused with what this is and what I normally do on large tracts of land. I went out to a 20-acre bottom field and set a dozen sets. Like that literally takes an hour to check that.
Yep.
So, that time of year, if you've got an hour in the morning, you'll throw some traps out.
Yeah.
Is that doing any good in the grand scheme of things? How do you measure that? Unless you're out there constantly, putting GPS collars on all your turkeys. I don't know.
Yeah.
But if there is a turkey that's nesting on that farm, maybe we can help her hatch.
Yeah.
And
have some fun in the meantime. I mean, trapping is fun.
I guess I'll measure success on that project if I can get one turkey to hatch a nest.
Yeah.
They say, there's a big argument that our poults are not making it to adulthood. The hatch rate is staying the same, but the poults aren't making it to adulthood. But if I can hatch, 100% of the nests on that property, well, 6% of that is a lot more than 6% of zero.
Yeah.
There's my argument to that.
For sure. Cool, man. Well, we'll definitely catch up with you here probably sooner than later. And thank you for coming on.
Yep. Appreciate it, guys.
All right, brother.
Cool.
Very cool.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely a big piece of the puzzle in trapping. When you talk about turkey declining or deer declining, I think it just varies in the area and significance of its impact.
Yeah.
In a fragmented setting like the Midwest, I think it's a big piece.
Mm-hmm.
In like these solid settings where kill goes at, I think the sponge rate of getting more predators in when you take them out is probably more prevalent.
Yeah. There's no doubt, dude, that there's way fewer trappers today.
100%.
I'll say than ever, which is probably true, but certainly more than like 15, 20 years ago. And we don't talk about that a whole lot in terms of like the increase in predator numbers. We talk a lot about, I guess, prescribed trapping, but on a landscape level, I mean, dude, everybody used to.
Well,
trap.
it's like, it'd be like saying, well, let's control the deer population via controlled hunts. Can't do it.
Right.
That's why you have public hunting, is so that everybody can go out and hunt. That's the only way to manage the population.
And it's interesting that like there's no market for deer necessarily like there had been for
like
for
monetary
fur.
Yeah,
but there's just like there's whether it's you call it an industry or there's a value assigned to the animal in terms of like a trophy.
Well, I have to believe that PETA and stuff has killed the fur market. Right?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that the motivation is different. Like you try to shoot a big buck because it's cool and it's bragging rights, but you try to trap coyotes because you want to grow deer or you want more at one
deer.
time there was a market, Yeah, those things have kind of like just dissolved a little bit.
Yeah, it's an afterthought. Now it's just part of a management plan. That's why people kill them. I mean, people don't go out and trap coons because they want to. They trap coons because they think it's going to help something else.
Huh. Well, and dude, we just don't spend as much time in it. You know what I mean? There probably are guys out there that are like,
oh, I'm sure there are.
Dude, the coyote hunting thing is
Eric
big.
and Angela, which we should have on at some point. I mean, they probably trap more than they deer hunt.
Yep.
And they kill a lot of coyotes and a lot of foxes and a lot of coons.
Yeah.
I think it comes back to like that waterfowl deer comparison where you can't have it both ways. Like you can't be all in on trapping and deer hunting.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
You can like to do both, but you're in on one of them.
Yeah. Cool.
So.
Well, hey man, trapping is definitely out there. It is a blast. I've done a lot of it. Not recently, but
it's
I'd
fun,
love
man.
to get back to it. And if you haven't done that, I mean, it's definitely something to check out. So
cool. Well, we will see you all next week.
All right, later.
Take me